And bellying up to the 9-foot homemade oak bar, my name is Craig Toth, your host for Minor League News and Brews. Also the co-host with my good friend Chris Lanuti for our regular Bucs in the Basement show. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get one of these out to you guys last week because my 6-year-old son decided it was a good idea to come down with a fever that lasted for about 4 or 5 days. But it kind of worked itself out because I was hoping to see another Jared Jones start. The feature of this week is going to be pitchers, and that really helped me out on what I was kind of looking at with him. It goes into discussions that myself and Chris have had. I've had with other podcasts. I was just on the 412 Double Play podcast, so go ahead, check that one out. But it's the conversations concerning the ABS system, using that, especially in AAA, versus the challenge system where you're getting the calls from umps, but you have so many challenges. If you get them correct, then you get to use some more until you run out of them. But I made a statement on this most recent episode of Bucs in the Basement. Came out on Wednesday. Go back and listen to that as well. And it was concerning Roansy Contreras' stats for last year. Roansy Contreras in 2022 had a 3.79 ERA, a 1.274 whip in 95 innings, and that was in the majors. Did go down to the minors for a little bit. Like I said, a lot of that had to deal with, maybe a little bit of service time manipulation, also being able to spread out the rest days. But it is what it is. Obviously, me, a lot of other Pirates fans expected him to come back out and maybe improve, but at least perform as well as he had. Because looking back at it, in 2021, most of that time spent in Altoona, had a .931 whip. In 2022, all in Indianapolis, had the 1.223 whip. So as you can see, walks and hits per innings pitch has not really been an issue for Roansy. And the big thing they asked him to do this offseason, him and Luis Ortiz, who I am going to get to after Roansy, is that they asked him to start to work and add in a changeup more often. In 2022, he only threw the changeup, or what was listed as a changeup in StatCast, at 2.9%. He threw his fastball about 48.5%, the slider 34.5%, and a curveball. Really good 3 offerings there at 14.1%. But they wanted to see him and Luis Ortiz add to that and mix in a changeup a little bit more. He did end up throwing about, I think it was around 400 less pitches so far in the major leagues this year as compared to last year. Only threw the changeup 3.9% of the time. Actually threw the slider a lot more. Bumped that up by almost 10% to 44.3%. The fastball dropped by over 8% to 40.2%, and the curveball dropped around 3% to 11.7%. The biggest thing for me here is that he lost about a mile per hour on his average fastball, coming in an average of 94.3. He didn't pump the heat as much as Luis Ortiz did. Luis Ortiz topping out around like 101. Roansy's always been the guy that usually sat around like 94 to like 96 maybe, and then topping out around like 97. But losing that on there. So I went and I started looking for a decent amount of information about people adding change-ups to their repertoire. and the impact it can have on pretty much, the general outlay of, how they pitch. And this is from Driveline Baseball. And it says right here, I just kind of want to quote the article because it would just lays it out pretty nicely for everybody is young pitchers who rely on a changeup and throw it often in their bullpen sessions will often change their throwing mechanics to get better sink and velocity separation on their fastball. As a result, their pitching mechanics become highly linear and their arm speed decreases due to poor use of rotational force, and this loss of velocity creeps into all of their pitches, including their fastball. So talking about that drop in the fastball, drop on the curve. So the big thing for me was wanting to go back and start to look at Roansy's pitches since he's kind of come back up to AAA. I had been sent down to Pirate City, down in Bradenton, and then has been getting some quote unquote starts, piggybacks, whatever it would be, up here in Indianapolis, and wanted to see what his changeup usage was. Going back to August 10th, he threw the changeup 22% of the time, and overall this took 1.5 miles per hour off of his fastball, and that's on using this year's average. So, last year's average was a little bit higher, around 95.3. This year it was 94.3. So taking a full mile and a half off of that. On August 15th, he threw the changeup 11 times, and you saw a 1.7 mile per hour difference in the average velocity of his fastball. 8:20, he threw it 14% of the time, and you saw that velocity drop by 0.7 miles per hour. 15% on August 26th, and then you saw the drop of over a half a mile per hour on his fastball. 9:6, he threw it 11% of the time, and you saw the 1.4 mile per hour drop. And during his last one, I wanted to look at every single pitch and see what was coming off of that. And he threw the changeup 13% of the time. He was below his fastball average of the 94.3 average. He was down 2.5 miles per hour on the fastball, 2.8 miles per hour on the slider, 1.6 miles per hour on the changeup, and 1.4 miles per hour on his curveball. And this is something that, everybody's been saying that he's not injured, although he did go, I think he did get a week off with some shoulder soreness, but jumping, kind of right back into it, they still are, throwing this curveball, and they're saying that it's not an effort thing. He still has the ability to throw it. It's more of a mechanical issue. And basically, I in 2 seconds, me, a layman, somebody who's not a pitching coach, just found an article and saw that basically that there is, when they try to, work on it in their bullpen sessions, which is something he was doing during the off season, that they throw off their throwing mechanics, that they, they become highly linear, the arm speed decreases, and they're, trying to throw this pitch a lot different. So for me, I know that, the big thing is that, how can a pitcher live at Major League Baseball? How can a pitcher succeed in Major League Baseball, with just the fastball and the slider and then maybe the curve, to keep, hitters off balance? Well, he did throw what was listed as a changeup at 2.9%, and the 1.274 whip is pretty much going to be around a middle of the rotation arm. It's definitely an everyday starter in Major League Baseball. I don't know if they were worried that, maybe hitters would catch up to that at some point in time and catch on to it, and that he would start to experience less success. But it kind of seems like when you try to throw this type of pitch in, that it can have, a little bit of a, I don't know, just a poor effect on pitching. And just going to another example, somebody else who they said that they wanted to throw the changeup more, and this one, about the amount of throwing the changeup is kind of like the amount that Roansy has been throwing the changeup in the minor leagues. Because, like I said, I mean, he only got the 68 innings in 2023. Roansy did 6.59 ERA, 1.566 WHIP, which is just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, that's not even in your rotation. That's not even like the sixth man. That's somebody who ends up getting sent down to the minors like Roansy did. But I mean, they're starting to throw his changeup even more, and he's seeing drops in velocity even below what he had done when he was only throwing the changeup slightly more. With Luis Ortiz, looking back to 2022, and this is in the major leagues, he threw the four-seam fastball 42.9% of the time, threw the slider 37.1% of the time, the sinker was 14.9% of the time, and the changeup 5% of the time. And coming in, like I said, the same thing, coming into this season, he was probably working on that changeup in the bullpen. He has taken the changeup from 5% to 14% of the time. His slider in his time in the major league has actually overtaken overtook the four seam fastball, and it overtook his slider. So it basically became, it's just absolutely ridiculous. Like, he's throwing his slider 31.8% of the time. The sinker is 27.6% of the time. Four seam fastball 26.2%. The aforementioned changeup 14% of the time, and a cutter 3% of the time. So you saw the slider jump over the fastball. He is throwing the sinker a little bit more. But the same thing with him here. In his time in the majors this year, you saw his slider has lost over 3 miles per hour. His sinker has lost around 2 miles per hour. And his four-seam fastball has lost, up over 2 miles per hour. And for me, I mean, you look at, I know a lot of people, there's been a lot of discussion on X today. I'll still call it Twitter most of the time, but on X today, about what stats do you judge, and a lot of it, people are like, how important is ERA? So you won't see much of it different in the ERA. So 2022, when he was throwing the changeup only 5% of the time, he had a 4.50 ERA. Now this year, throwing it 14% of the time, has a 4.66 ERA. Not much of a difference. The big difference here is the jump in the whip. And like I said, if you've listened to any of these shows before, you know that whip is something that I look at a lot. So whip is going to be the thing that I focus on, a ton when I'm trying to look to see, basically if a pitcher's putting, if he's walking people, hitting people, giving up hits, putting people on, he's more likely to see his ERA go up. He didn't see it in, the time he pitched 73.1 innings this year. Whip is, almost like a half a point higher, and only 16 innings, so far this year at the time that I wrote this down and was looking at this. And then the other big thing is that, in 2022, you're not going to see much of a difference in minor league baseball between 2023 and what he did in the minor leagues. He threw 124 innings in 2022, 4.56 ERA. He threw 56.2 innings in 2023, and that's only up to a 4.61 ERA. But once again, the whip last year when he was throwing, the changeup not as much. He was relying on the four-seam fastball, the slider, and the sinker. It was a 1.142 whip in those 124 innings. This year, a 1.394 whip in the 56.2 innings in the minor leagues. So for me, I mean, we're talking about, losing velocity and the average velocity, and it's kind of fairly simple, and maybe it's something they can work on again here to not, make the mechanics, them stray so far away from what they were previously. But it's just talking about introducing this to young pitchers who really didn't throw a changeup very often. It may not even been the shape or, the velocity that they were looking for. And it could really screw up, the rest of the pitching stuff. And with especially with Roansy, they're talking about mechanics being the major issue. Moving into what I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, the ABS system, and I was very curious as to how, the ABS system has been affecting minor league pitchers. I think it was the Bridge to Bucktober podcast. Go back and listen to this one. They did a pretty deep dive on the ABS system. And also, when they still have the ABS system in place, but there's more of that challenge system where you can, the hitter or the pitcher or the catcher can, touch the top of their head and tell them that they would want to have a pitch reviewed. And it's the effect of this ABS system and the, I guess it would be the challenge system, for lack of a better terms, on the strikeout rates and the walk rates in minor league baseball. So before we get into, like, Jared Jones was the one that I just saw a very stark contrast and stuff. And like I said, I wanted to see that one more start from him. Basically, in AAA, as of the time of this article, in 2022, there was a 9.19 K per 9 innings pitched strikeout rate. This year, in AAA, it has dropped to 9.02, and when they're using the full ABS system, it goes down below 9 to 8.9 Ks per 9. Now, the walk ratio, without the ABS system, any type, the challenge, the full ABS system, last year in 2022, it was a 4.07 base on ball per 9, the walk ratio. This year in 2023, it is 4.87 base on balls per 9. When they're using the full ABS, it goes the whole way up to 5.2 walks per 9. That is, if you're jumping over a full walk per 9, it was kind of crazy to me. So I started looking at Jared Jones. And Jared Jones is a guy, I mean, if you looked at the ERA, it wouldn't be great when he first came up to AAA. It was 4.72 innings through June and July. That accounted for 34.1 innings pitched. Now, for me, like I said before, I always go to the whip. He had what would be like, a 1 or a 2 within a pitching rotation. He has the 1.17 whip, and looking at the FIP, he had a 3.08 FIP, and that's fielder independent pitching. So that's everything that he is in control of. So basically saying that he was pitching extremely well. In those 34.1 innings pitched, he had a 41 Ks, which works out to 10.75 Ks per 9. He had 10 walks, which works out to 2.62 walks per 9. Now, I'm going to tell you that in 7 of his first 8 starts, which takes up the majority of that time, is when he had the full-time umps and when he did not, basically would have to use the challenge. There was not the full ABS system in place. He has had 4 games with the full ABS system in place, and the majority of those have taken place in August and September, with his most recent start not falling under that. So that's why I was kind of waiting for that start to see how he pitched. And just to let you know, in August and September, when the majority of his games were called by the ABS system, he has a 5.59 ERA, a 1.57 whip, So basically 0.4 points higher. The FIP goes the whole way from 3.08 to 4.74. He does keep the K rate, which what we said was the K rate wasn't affected as much by the ABS system, the challenge system, whatever it may be. At most, it went down by like 0.2, but in some cases, just like maybe down by like 0.1. He went from 10.75 Ks per 9 to 10.70 Ks per 9, so pretty much about equal. His walks, with the majority of those starts coming with the full ABS system, he went from 10 walks in those 34 innings to 21 walks in 37 innings, which brings the base on balls per 9 up from 2.62 the whole way up to 5.11. So almost completely doubling the base on balls per 9. And the thing for me is, like, his last start, he went, and this one was under the challenge system, so not using the full ABS. He gave up 4 hits in 7 innings, did not give up a single run, walked 1 batter, and he struck out 4. Now, in one of the games where he did have the ABS system in place, he pitched 5 innings. He gave up 8 hits, 3 runs, and he did strike out 9, but he did have the 2 walks. In one of the next ones after that, in between these two, he is a time when it was just absolutely ridiculous. He did have like the 10 strikeouts, but he also had the 4 walks. So we're seeing like with the ABS system. So, I mean, I know that it's coming. And like the other thing I want to touch on with like Jared Jones, when people are talking about like why he was struggling in August and September. And the big thing here, again, is that there is him, you know, at times that he was playing with pitches. In his first start in August, he pretty much went like full fastball slider, a little bit of the curve, like 3% of the changeup. During his next start, he went almost half fastball, half slider with 20% of the changeup mixed in. And what we've seen is the changeup usage has stuck above what would have normally been his 3% again. So I mean, I know that people want to work this changeup in, but like I'm just seeing that like the times that he throws it more is the times that he has like his worst games. Like he threw it 3% of the time first start in August, then went up to 20%, 9%, 15%, 12%, back down to like around like 7%, and you know, had a fairly, you know, not a terrible start, but that one was with the ABS system. And then the next one, where he's not throwing the changeup that much, is when he has a very good start with the umps. So for me, like this one is like kind of twofold: is seeing the effects of, you know, trying out new pitches, working stuff in, so seeing stuff go up, but then just seeing the stark contrast of a player that has, you know, most of his games called with an ump, and then, you know, the rest of it called with the ABS system. I mean, for him, I've never seen such a stark contrast of any player, where basically like his numbers, other than the Ks, which we said wasn't really affected by that, kind of going off the charts, is as far as the whip and the base on balls per 9. Before we get to the beers, the one thing I wanted to talk to about is I saw Anthony Solometo. I didn't originally, you know, plan on talking about this, so this one may run a little bit longer. Was Anthony Solometo's innings fatigue? And I had mentioned this once again on the 412 Double Play podcast. Ed Wassel and Michael Castriano, thank you guys so much for having me on. But I brought up Solometo's innings fatigue. In 2021, in high school, he threw only 32.2 innings. In his first Major League Baseball season in 2022, he threw 47.2 innings. And this just kind of works out to me as why, I mean, he just went back on the developmental list for the second time this year. His season, may be over with him added to that. We've seen Bubba Chandler add to that as well, because I think they kind of sort of have innings caps as to how they want to work these guys up. But for Anthony Solometo, I saw a very stark contrast in, after he had kind of gotten worked up and then maybe worn out. In April through July, he threw 87.1 innings. So that would be like his first almost 90 innings pitched in minor league baseball this season. He had a 2.58 ERA, a 1.13 whip, and a 3.11 FIP. He had 101 strikeouts at a rate of 10.41 Ks per nine. A little bit high on the base on balls. He had 31 base on balls at a 3.19 base on ball per nine rate. Now, in August, in 18.2 innings pitched, and I didn't count like the last, quote unquote, fairly like a little bit start that he had in September, but it was 6.73 ERA in those 18.2 innings, a 1.61 whip, a 5.47 FIP. He had only 14 strikeouts for 6.75 Ks per nine, and he had 8 walks for 3.86 base on balls per nine. And I just kind of want to put this one out here just as a little bit of like anybody that was worried, that Solometo, he started to struggle a little bit. For me, this is a regular innings fatigue. Kid's only 20 years old. Solometo will be back in Double-A next year. Hopefully, building up to a little bit more innings. But, I mean, if you see it, like right now, like Mitch Keller, as we talked about, Chris and I on the last episode, is, the highest, he has the highest innings pitcher on the Pirates staff. He's 10, or I think within the top 10 in Major League Baseball. And he may not even get to 200 innings this year. So, I mean, I would not worry about Solometo. Just kind of putting that out there. I was hoping to get to Priester. Next week, definitely going to get to Skeens. Hopefully bringing in somebody who could give us a little bit of insight onto Skeens' pitch shape, pitch selection that he used at LSU. Something that I'm really looking forward to doing. Was hoping to get that one in there today as well. But, we keep this to around a half an hour, and we still have to do some beer reviews.
A pitcher of beer, a pitcher of beer. Let's order another pitcher of beer. That pitcher of beer should come over here. I love that pitcher of beer.
All right, guys, it is Oktoberfest season. These are like some of my favorite beers every year. And I do have a favorite. And no, it is not Samuel Adams Oktoberfest. It's probably one of the first Oktoberfests that I had, but it's definitely not my favorite. But I am still going to review it because I'm pretty sure it is one of the first ones I had. Used to be a icy light PBR type of guy before I started to get into the craft beer scene a little bit more. But Samuel Adams was probably like the little bit of the step into that. So the Sam Adams Oktoberfest, for one thing, they don't spell it with a K. They spell it out straight October. Coming in at 5.3%. I gave that a 4.00. Knocked that down to 350. And the next one is going back up as far along lines of like my favorites. I have two favorites. This one is not there, but it's definitely one of the good ones. The Hofbrauhaus, and go down to whatever that is on the other side of the south side. What is it? The South Side Works, I believe it is. The Hofbrauhaus. That one coming in at 6.3%. Give that one a 450. Knock that down to 400. If I am going with the foreign maker one, I am gonna go with the Spaten. If anybody's not had a Spaten Oktoberfest, this thing is delicious. Coming in at 5.9%. Give that one a 475. Knock it down to 425. And my absolute favorite Oktoberfest. Already got a 12-pack of it. Probably going to get another 12-pack of it for the Steeler game on Monday night. This is what I drank for the Steeler game on Sunday. Did not drink the whole 12-pack, of course, but had gotten it in preparation for that. Penn Brewery, Penn Oktoberfest coming in at 5.6%. Give that one the 500, bring that down to 450. And right now, we only have a couple teams going. Last weekend for the Altoona Curve, so go Curve. We got about another week left of the Indianapolis Indians, so go Indians. And going to be coming with some Paulskins, and then obviously after that, going to be doing some recaps on each level of the minor leagues. I'll talk to you guys next time.